All right, greetings everybody, and welcome to week number 5. That is right, week number 5 of your 9407 class, which is your intellectual freedom and its discontents class. As always, I'm your professor, Dr. Jace K. Austin, and what we're going to do today is we're going to have a quick state of the course update, and then after we do our state of the course update, which again is going to be fairly quick this time around, I am going to just soapbox a little bit on hate speech and why I am undecided on it. There's not much for me to say. I'm really just going to be speaking my own opinions. And it's not going to take us too long to get through all of that. So this should be a 20-minute video unsped, and hopefully even, well, definitely even shorter than that. Sped, of course, but 20-minute video unsped is what we are targeting here. So let's go ahead and get into our state of the course update, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about hate speech and just why I'm undecided as to whether or not it should have constitutional protection or not, and how that affects the class. Okay, all right, so let's go. So first of all, let's get into what's coming due on the horizon. We can get rid of that, and we can get rid of that. And you do have a new intellectual freedom news post that is in the announcement section. And then here's what you need to know coming up for our state of the course update. All right, so we are finishing our court case stuff this week. So for those of you who are just like, oh no, this stuff, this court stuff, why is he putting all this in here? I am not a lawyer. I don't want to read court cases such and such and such. Well, we are almost done. You've got this week and then you will be done. So with that said, you do have a First Amendment examination. I have said this before, but let me reiterate it so that nobody is left in the dark. I want you all to know that this First Amendment examination that is due Sunday night, which is actually not that hard, especially if you've been reading the material, this exam should not be that hard. I'm surprised that I don't get perfect 7s out of 7s every single time, every single semester, but I don't. There are sometimes I do get people with 5s and 6s. I end up with I don't know, it seems like every semester I have like 3 or 4 students who get a 5 or a 6. I'm just like, how? Especially because it's open book. Again, I repeat this, it is open book. I mentioned this before. I'm going to say it again. This exam that is due on Sunday night is open book. So what I would recommend is opening a browser, for instance, opening a browser and having 2 windows. You can have the exam going on in one window, and then in the other window you can have Google going, and if you want to Google the answer, I don't care. I'm fine with that. Yes, I want you to retain the information, but if you were gonna forget it as soon as you took the exam, then then you were just going to do that anyway, whether or not the exam was open book or not. So yes, it's open book. I'm hoping that all of you get 7s out of 7s on it, and it's not that difficult, especially if you've been reading the material. Okay, so that is pretty much it for our state of the course update. Well, there are a few other things. So yes, you will also have a hate speech module this week, and then starting next week, you'll actually have your library neutrality module next week, which we've already had our sync session on library neutrality, so you've already kind of gotten your feet wet on this, but we'll have a whole module devoted to it next week. And then also I do want you all to be aware that the first week of October, you are actually going to have a sync session. October the 1st is a Tuesday, and we will be hearing, and that's going to be 2 weeks from today. If you are reading or watching this on the 17th, we're going to be hosting Leanne Lord that day, who is a comedian, and she's going to be talking about intellectual freedom within comedy, which is something that I think is very relevant to this course, because the intellectual freedom rules for comedy tend to be a little different from the standard, because supposedly with comedy you might be pushing envelopes with the goal of trying to push the envelope a little bit. You might be pushing the envelope a little bit to try to get people to laugh, and a lot of times people are not going to laugh at benign stuff and boring stuff, and you do have to get a little edgy with it. So comedy has got its own little thing going, and we're going to talk to Leanne Lord about that. I'm also going to put a free video from Leanne Lord in the course at some point, so that if you want to actually check her out before she comes and speaks to us, you'll be able to do that as well. Okay, all right, so that is pretty much it for these state of the course updates. I will have I'll be talking about banned books in next week's what was that? Sorry, we'll be talking about banned books and banned book week, banned books week next week. because next week is Banned Books Week. It starts on the 22nd, which is going to be this coming Sunday. And so I will actually talk about it on the actual week instead of beforehand. I have talked about it beforehand, but we can talk about it next week. All right, so that is pretty much it, again, with the state of the course updates. And with that said, let's go ahead and shift over to hate speech. And I'm just going to soapbox a little bit. If you don't feel like hearing me just ramble on about this, you can cut the video off now. But I did want to just say a few things about hate speech. So the first thing that I want to say is that it is deliberate. I do the hate speech debate every semester that I teach this class. I teach it every fall, so I do the hate speech debate every fall, pick people out to participate in that. The debates never really go the same any from one semester to another, and that's because you're dealing with different people from one semester to another. So that's good. It still stays fresh, and I will continue doing the hate speech debates until, I don't know. Once there's something else that's a better debate topic or a more relevant debate topic, then we can get into that. But hate has been very, very relevant, and I would say hate has been very relevant even since 2001. I think that in my lifetime, I would say that hate speech and hate materials have been, they saw increased relevance after 9/11 2001. That's in my opinion. And then it continued with the Obama administration, and then it certainly continued on with Trump, and it continues till today. But once hate speech is not something that is at the forefront, then I may change to something else. But right now, hate speech is still definitely something that is at the forefront of people's minds in this society, okay? So when I talk about hate speech, for one thing, I want to mention and note that, and as you'll see this in your module this week, we do not have, so first of all, hate speech is protected in this country. There is no court case, there is no case law that makes hate speech unprotected. And you will hear, and I've spoken about this before, you will hear librarians, I don't know where they're getting this shit from, but you will hear librarians say hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment. And then when you ask them, how is it not? What case law makes it unprotected? They'll look at you like you're from outer space. But you'll be able to tell them fighting words are not protected because of the Chaplinsky decision, and obscenity is not protected because of the Miller decision, and so forth and so on. You'll be able to point to actual case law and say that, no, this is not protected because of this. And then when you ask these people what case law makes hate speech unprotected, they're going to look at you with a blank look because they don't know what they're talking about, okay? Hate speech is protected by the Constitution in this country. Now, in Western Europe, that is not the case. In a lot of Western European countries, hate speech is actually not protected. Hold on for a second. Hate speech is not protected and can even be criminally penalized. And you all may have, even if you were paying attention to the Olympics, you may have even saw a little bit of this. I'm not going to get into the one thing that, even though we have intellectual freedom in this class, and this may disappoint some of you all, but I really just kind of listen when it comes to gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. I mostly listen on those topics, and I don't do a whole lot of talking. I talk about race a lot, but really when it comes to me, a lot of times what I'm doing is I like to talk the most about things to where I have that perspective that's outside of the mainstream perspective. I'm male, so I don't have the disenfranchised perspective. I'm straight, so I don't have the disenfranchised perspective. I am cisgender, so I don't have the disenfranchised perspective, right? So the reason why I'm saying all that is because I try not to, with people like J.K. Rowling who do a lot of stuff in talking about gender. I know this might disappoint some of you all, but I actually don't comment on that a lot because I'm not a woman, and I don't want to, there's a limit to how much I want to actually weigh in on the correctness of a woman speaking on women's issues, right? Like, who the hell am I to do that, right? Don't get me wrong, it's not that I agree with J.K. Rowling. That is not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is, and I've had a lot of feedback, particularly from female students and from women students about this, is for the most part, I don't pass value judgments on, whether or not what J.K. Rowling says is or without merit. I try to avoid doing that. And that's been a very divisive position. But when I say divisive, what I mean is sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. I've had people actually call me out in the class and say, "Hey, Dr. Chase is not saying this. He's not saying that." And if good men are silent, then that allows evil to prosper and those sorts of things. But then I've also had students, and it does speak to me also that the students who weigh in and say, "Hey, Dr. J should be saying this because people need to speak out against this stuff, being neutral is violence, and those sorts of things." Those people will be very public about what they say. But I've had a lot of female students from this course in the past, and I do mean a lot, email me or message me privately and just be like, but they couldn't speak it in the class, even in an intellectual freedom class. But they would message me privately and be like, "Dr. Jace, thank you for allowing us to think for ourselves. Thank you for not being the man who comes in and tells women how they should feel about this, how they should feel about that." That's gonna be the case with me when it comes to women's issues, when it comes to women's identities and things like that. I am very hesitant to speak on those things because I lack perspective. No, I will speak on men's issues, but that's different. And so I will speak on men's issues, and I will say that as a cisgender man, no, I am not bothered by trans gender men coming in and using male facilities, or man facilities, if that's the right word to use, using men's bathrooms, playing in men's sports, and those sorts of things. Of course, I don't have any objection to that. But I'm only going to speak on the men's side. Yeah, transgenderism, when it comes to people who transition from woman to man or from female to man. I have no hesitations whatsoever with those people at all. They are my brothers. They are my brothers. So I just leave it at that. But I'm only, again, going to speak on the issue on the men's side because I don't know what it's like to, I will never know what it's like to compete against somebody and feel that they have a biological advantage that everyone else on this side doesn't have. I'm never going to be in that situation. So I'm very hesitant to talk about that. Okay. Um, but having said that, I will also, I'll monitor conversations that you all are having with each other, and try to make sure that people are feeling make sure that people are feeling respected and valued and that sort of thing. I want everybody in this class to feel safe and valued and respected. Okay, but that also, again, does mean that I limit how much I talk about things when I lack perspective. All right. The reason why I put that out there. Okay, so again, that got rambly, but getting back to where I was going with that. So you all may have noticed that, and may have read that J.K. Rowling may be subject to some criminal penalty or to a lawsuit due to things that she had said about an Algerian boxer who, by the way, is a biological woman. Let's make that clear. This is somebody who is a biological female who um, was born with biological female parts. I don't know how better to put that, but this is not a she's talking gender identity related to a boxer who's not even transgender and who had lost to uh cisgender females in fights previously. Okay. So I say all of that to say that yes, the lawsuit of that nature was not going to occur here in the United States, but that was something that could be criminally examined and even civilly examined within laws in European countries. Now, my belief on all of this is I'm worried about hate speech not having constitutional protections for the exact reasons why I am looking at the Miller test and the Brandenburg test as being imperfect tests, right? I'm going to focus on the Miller test for right now. So when I'm talking about the Miller test, and we've had our discussions on the Miller test and everything, what did you notice about the Miller test? The Miller test is very, very subjective. Things that can be deemed obscene in South Carolina may not necessarily be deemed obscene in New York State and that sort of thing. So it's subjective, it's inconsistent. And when that applies to hate speech, I think we really get into murky territory. So, especially, I'm going to go back to the comedy element that I was talking about. There is so much comedy that I think could be considered hate speech if you don't have a good enough test in place to determine, okay, is this hate speech or is this not? If hate speech loses its constitutional protections, my assumption is that then they're going to have to come up with some sort of test to determine, okay, is this hate speech or is this not hate speech? And I think that a lot of the stuff that is considered comedy right now would be considered hate speech. And I don't like that. I think that we need to preserve comedy. We need to allow people to be able to make jokes and go into a venue and have a good time. And I have mixed feelings about Punching Down too, but for the sake of keeping this video fairly not too long, I won't go into that too much, except just to say that I feel that I identify a little bit more with the South Park philosophy on comedy, which is either everything's okay to joke about or nothing is. I might not necessarily like a joke that demeans black people, but if it's a joke that's made in the spirit of comedy, hey, I'm cool with it. And there are some things that I think are distasteful to joke about, but they're not necessarily things that I think it should be unprotected to joke about. The first example of that I will come to all the time is going to be rape, okay? Rape and sexual assault, I don't think those things are funny. And I don't think they're ever funny. And so I never really appreciate a rape joke, but I've seen comedians make rape jokes. I've seen Dango Tosh make rape jokes. I've seen the comedian Godfrey, if you've heard of him, I've seen him make rape jokes. And I'm not with it, but again, should it be unprotected? Well, a rape joke wouldn't be hate speech, I don't think anyway. But again, there are things that I think should be allowed to go on in comedy, and I think that when you actually make hate speech unprotected, that's going to make a lot of stuff that we appreciate in comedy go away. With that said, however, I know that all of that makes it seem like, okay, I do want hate speech to be protected. The other thing that I worry about, though, is what's going on with people these days when people do have the means to. First of all, I think that bullying is a lot easier to do today than it ever was prior to the advancement of social media, right? So when it comes to hate speech, one reason why I could see why it shouldn't be protected is because I think that I think it's easier to bully people with hate speech now with social media and to pile onto them than it used to be prior to the days of social media. And I am old enough to remember, some of you actually aren't even old enough to remember before MySpace. That is how old I've gotten. But I remember not only before MySpace, I actually remember before the internet. And yes, before the internet, yes, you saw hate speech, but it was very hard to pile on the people. And you wouldn't necessarily get exposed to a lot of hate speech before the internet. Like it just, where were you finding it? You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess if you wanted to consider something like Rush Limbaugh hate speech or something like that, then maybe you could say, okay, you find it on liberal and conservative radio or something like that. But it wasn't like you would just turn, before the advancement of social media, it wasn't like you were just going on to the internet even prior to social media. Yeah, you would see hate sites, but you could avoid them very easily. But now with social media, all the hate is coming right at you, right? And people can pile that hate on you. They can do it in real time. And it does lead to people killing themselves or harming themselves. And especially when it's children doing that. And we have had those instances of children who are getting bullied, especially on gender issues, and they're taking their lives and that sort of thing, or they're doing other things to harm themselves. We gotta nip that in the bud, okay? So that would be one of my reasons for saying, hey, okay, maybe in this current day and age when people can kind of pile on and bully with hate speech to the point where people are losing their lives, then maybe that does give us some grounds to say, okay, hate speech should not be legal or should not be protected. But I don't know. I'm mixed on the issue. And that's why I look forward to our debate later. Where do you stand on it? You can hit the free for all section if you want, but also we will talk about hate speech in this module, so you can kind of expound on that there as well on this week's discussion board prompt. But anyway, let's keep this under 20 minutes. I am Dr. Jace, and hate speech is something that can be about gender. It can be about orientation. It can be about religion. It can be about race. and it can be about a bunch of other things. But what I want you to do is, even if you think that hate speech should be protected, or whether or not you think it should be protected or not, I hope you don't engage in it. Let's just leave it at that. I will see you all next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.